Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. This webinar is brought to you by the New Hampshire Training Institute on Addictive Disorders. As you can see, you can access the recording of this webinar. It's going to be archived on the NHADACA website, which, as you can see there, is www.NHADACA.org. A certificate. After completing this webinar, please upload and complete the quiz. You'll find that in the file pod that is over on the right in this PowerPoint. It's labeled Quiz Teen Culture Webinar. You can also find it on our website at nhadaca.org/webinar.html. You can email, mail, or fax the completed quiz. You can find the contact info at any point during this webinar below in the pod that is kind of along the middle bottom of your screen that lists different forms of contact info. If you are a member of NHADACA or NADAC, the certificate for this webinar is free. If you are not a member, the fee is $15. You will receive a certificate worth 1 CE once you have completed and passed the quiz and paid for the webinar, if that is applicable to you. Through co-sponsorship with the New Hampshire Training Institute on Addictive Disorders, this 1-hour event is pre-approved by the New Hampshire Board of Licensing for alcohol and other drug use professionals. Technical support. If you have any trouble viewing the webinar, if you have any audio problems, or if you have any technical questions, please contact the Training Institute at 603-225-7060. And you may recall that contact number can also be found down at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions, please actually use the email address that you can find in that pod down below. We're transitioning to a new email address, traininginstitute@nhadaca.org. So with those logistics covered, my name is Marissa Carlson. I'm here from the New Hampshire Teen Institute, and I am so excited to be spending the next hour with you talking about teen culture. So thank you so much for everyone who is joining us live, and thank you for anyone who's joining us afterwards. I work and have worked for about 10 years with the Teen Institute. I have the pleasure of working with our high school age participants and also our high school and college age volunteer staff. So I get a chance to hang out with teens a lot and hear some of the things that they are interested in and kind of stay up on some of those things that they are most excited about. Outside of Teen Institute programs, I also do a lot of theater and get a chance to work with teenage cast members in different shows that I work with. So a little bit taking it out of that kind of formal programming sphere as well. So when we think of teen culture, before we start, we want to kind of have a little reminder, sometimes the disconnect and sometimes a little bit of that panic that sometimes happens between teens and adults when we try and understand each other's cultures. So we are going to send you in a little bit of an outside of the box way to a video. We want to make sure that you have great sound, and we realize that's going to happen better on your computer than coming through the link that we were using. So please, everyone, check the top left hand of your screen for a chat box. You're going to see a chat box that has a web address, a URL in it. It starts with newsmockers.wordpress.com. If you could please take a moment to click on that link, that should open up that website. And if you scroll down just a little bit, you're going to see a video. It's about 4 minutes long, a little bit less. And if you want to take just a moment to watch that, just so you know, there are a couple, it is kind of PG-13. There are a couple sexual references, just verbal. If you work with teenagers in your life, you can probably handle it. But you might not have been expecting that going into a training today. So just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up. And if you just joined us, what we're doing right now is headed to that chat box on the upper left-hand corner. If you can click on that link, we're going to give you about 3.5 to 4 minutes to watch that video and then come back and talk about it for a moment. If anyone has any problems accessing that link, you can type it in the chat box, or we will send out the PowerPoint, so you'll have that to look at afterwards as well. All right, so it sounds like most people got a chance to watch that video by now. Um, so hopefully that was, just kind of a fun reminder about the importance of communication directly with the teenagers we're working with. If we have a question, asking that directly, maybe doing our own research. I think one of my favorite parts of that video is when the newscaster back in the studio refers people to, if they have more questions, to check their website and their website only. So making sure that we're getting the information that we need. One of the great things, with working with teens, we certainly have different kinds of privileges and access points. So the relationship we might have with high school students we're working with in a school setting, we might be privileged to some kinds of information and a certain kind of relationship with them. There might be different information, different insight we can get from, our own kids if we have teenagers in our family. So making sure we're asking questions about new trends that might come up, and not necessarily just jumping to that negative. Obviously, this video is, a huge parody and kind of overstatement of that idea, but it's great to kind of remind, sometimes we find things we don't understand, we hear about something we don't know about that wasn't around when we were teenagers, and sort of we automatically jump to that, it must be negative, it must be scary, and not necessarily thinking about, oh, you know what, we can have a conversation. And also some of the commonalities that are still around, some things, that we experienced as teenagers, no matter when we were teenagers, are certainly still things that teenagers today might be connected with. Maybe it's in a slightly different box, maybe it's communicating a slightly different way. But one of the things today that I hope to do is kind of demystify some of the popular culture things that teenagers are interested in right about now. All right. So one thing that's important to start off with, though, we're calling this, teen culture for the purposes of 1 hour that we're sharing together today. What does that mean? Obviously, teen culture is not monolithic. We wouldn't refer to an adult culture. Teen culture is kind of shorthand for a bunch of things, but it's always important to remember, of course, that, as you know from working with teens, it's not just one homogenous group of people. So other things that impact teen culture besides just their age would be, of course, the things that impact culture for all of us. So there's going to be a lot of differences in geography, both outside of New Hampshire and within New Hampshire. Socioeconomic status is going to impact their interests and also access to those interests. Ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, again, any of those things that would impact the culture and the interests of adults is going to also impact the culture and interests of teenagers. So in the time we have, though, we are going to look at some of the commonly shared interests of a number of high school students. We're going to look at those things both regionally and nationally. One of the things we're going to look at are sort of the values around how teens are spending their free time, and then look at what are those things that they're consuming culturally. So some of those pop culture things, TV, music, books, internet, social networking, different websites and apps. What are some of those things that they're excited about when they have that free time to spend? One thing, of course, too, to start with, sociologist Arthur Doyle, in a book that he wrote that was kind of looking at teen culture and its interaction and interplay with various forms of pop culture, is that there's a fundamental irony when we talk about teen culture in that what's consumed as teen culture is almost exclusively produced by adults. So teens are able to sort of take what adults are producing and decide which brands of that and which types of that really speak for them. So kind of going into that, teenagers are not able, financially, resourced to be able to create a lot of this culture themselves, but they are able to kind of pick and choose what is going to speak most to them. We're all at different knowledge and comfort levels with this topic. There's going to be things that we are all very familiar with. There's going to be things that maybe no one was very familiar with. The info that I'm presenting today is going to reflect 2014 as much as possible. So there's both some regional data and some national data from surveys and different articles that have been done that as much as possible are 2014, going back a little bit into 2012, 2013. So hopefully you are going to get something new out of this hour that we're spending together, or maybe a new resource of where to look for more info when you have a question about something. So, maybe going into this, you're familiar with some of the most popular apps that teens are using for smartphones and on the web, but maybe you're going to learn about some books that you hadn't heard about that are really popular with young adult readers right now. Maybe you know a lot about pop music, but you're going to leave hopefully feeling a little more comfortable navigating some of those apps. So let's talk a little bit about social time, and for teenagers, what some of those values are at. This section is going to look at some national data from a variety of sources, and we're also going to look at kind of a snapshot of fall 2014 that we got through a survey through the Teen Institute. So I want to emphasize, and I'll try to re-emphasize in case there's any mistake, the Teen Institute survey data from this fall does not have a sample size that allows us to make any kind of statistically significant claims. It definitely is not enough to represent the whole of New Hampshire, for instance. So don't take those percentages as, okay, that is absolutely what is happening in New Hampshire, and I'm going to go quote those. It's more a snapshot of a group of teens at this time. So think of it kind of more as like a focus group than something that really represents New Hampshire. But I thought, considering it's so new, that it could still help us out today. So when we're talking about values, one of the things that I think is important is that teens are often asked in surveys how they spend their time, but they're not often asked how they would prefer to spend their time. I think we often survey teens in the same way that we do adults and kind of forget that teenagers don't necessarily have the same control over the way they use their free time that adults might. Sometimes their social group might be making more decisions for them personally than happens for adults. They might not have access to transportation. They might not have financial resources to do all the things that they would like to do. That is, of course, not to say that adults have, endless free time and endless resources to just go have fun, but there are sort of a different set of concerns. So as much as possible in the snapshot of New Hampshire students that Teen Institute looked at this fall, we asked about preferences of their free time. So not necessarily how do they spend their time, but if, in a world where all things were equal, how would they like to spend their time? So kind of starting that off, we have here this number that's up. So we looked at physical activity. Did students prefer to include physical activity in their free time? That could be organized sports, that could be yoga, that could be hiking. That doesn't have to be necessarily spending time with a team at school. And as you can see here, just in our focus group that we worked with, 42% of those kids would make that choice to engage in physical activities in their free time. And then you can just see down there, there's a national statistic, which is that from USA Today, which is that about 56% of all high school students in the US play at least one sport. So, something where physical activity is certainly on the radar for a lot of our kids. It isn't necessarily the most exciting things. Oh, we have a question. What were the other survey options? Could that question be clarified just a little bit? We asked them on a scale of strongly prefer. So in this case with this question, if they strongly preferred including physical activity in their free time, if they somewhat preferred it, there was a neutral category, then there was a would slightly prefer not to include physical activity, or very much would absolutely not, do not make me play a sport. Okay, I'm glad that cleared that up. In that same type of question, we also asked about engaging in artistic activities. So would you like to engage in activities where you create arts, or would you like to engage in activities that you consume, arts as well? So that included things like playing in a band, participating in a play at school. Or it could also include going to see your friends in a band, or going to a museum, a kind of artistic cultural experience. And that was something that as you can see, a number of our students like to. And in the US, the numbers, which are, again, more statistically significant, 42% of high school students participate in school performing arts programs, and 41% indicate frequently attending arts events. I don't know the statistic about the crossover of that group. I would assume that there is a bit of a crossover in terms of some of those 42% are probably also represented in the 41%. Just for a quick moment, we did ask in our focus group about New Hampshire high school students preferring to use or be around alcohol or other substances in their free time. This is certainly not statistically significant. And I think obviously there is a huge bias considering that these would be students that participated, have some connection to Teen Institute. We run prevention programs, so hopefully we have a low number preferring to use or be around substances. But I just wanted to include it as something that we did look at and kind of, again, how are students interested in spending their free time? All right. So let's transition now into looking more at some specific ways that people are consuming media, and some specific ways that they like to, and some of the common ground that teens and adults share, and also where are we different. TV shows, absolutely some big common ground. In our Teen Institute group, the students surveyed definitely reflected a diverse range of interests, but those overlapped very closely with both the 2014 fall TV Nielsen ratings and also a 2013 Variety magazine article that looked at 12 to 34-year-old viewing habits. So, we saw a lot of like Big Bang Theory, Modern Family, things that really everyone's watching, quote unquote. Not necessarily everyone, but a lot of teenagers seem to really fit into those very traditional like broadcast and cable hits that are really hits kind of across the board population-wise in the US. Oh, and thank you, Kirsten. There's a comment about appreciating this way of which engaging with young people. Awesome. So when we talked about, specifically in our New Hampshire group of students that we spoke of, one of the things we found interesting, we wanted to make sure that the questions we were asking about TV shows included current shows, but included the different formats that students might be watching them on. So not just including broadcast and cable TV shows that are currently in production, but also non-traditional networks. So Netflix or Amazon, some of those original programming things that they're doing, as well as web series. And it was interesting to find that none of the students that we talked with, when they really boiled it down to those top 3 favorite shows that are currently going, none of them listed a web series, and none of them even listed anything that was from a non-traditional TV network. So, for example, Orange is the New Black or Transparent, things that are coming from these non-traditional sources. It's possible that they certainly are more platform neutral for watching TV shows than a lot of adults are. And so by that, I mean, feeling perfectly comfortable watching a TV show on TV, watching it on demand, watching it on their laptop, watching it on their phone. But the creators of that content, in terms of their favorite shows right now, are still really lining up with a lot of those traditional producers of content. One of the things we definitely found was the geek chic societal trend. That is present in teen culture as well. So something that you may or may not be familiar with or have thought of is the way that a lot of different kinds of comic books, sci-fi, supernatural things have become more popular in the past decade or so. So they have kind of come out of just being a niche market. If you kind of picture that 1980s Star Trek convention, maybe a suburban hotel conference room with a few people dressed up in costume. The conventions of today and the fan worlds of today are very, very different and become so much more mainstream. So some people describe this as geek chic, which kind of gets at the idea that these niche markets, these kind of shows that we're seen as very nerdy, that we're seen as very kind of outsidery, that these are now much more fashionable. If you think of kind of top box office hits in recent years with the Avengers, with Iron Man, a lot of shows based on comic books, a lot of movies based on comic books have become very popular. And so geek chic is something that has definitely sort of taken off, and is something we're really seeing that at the high school level as well. Geek Chic can also refer to fashion. So we're not going to really get into the clothing side of teen culture in this particular hour, but just so you know, Geek Chic really covers a lot of different kinds of these topics in popular teen culture. So there is a video. We're not going to watch it right now, but you're going to, oh, you know what? We are going to try something. We're going to try to throw this video in here. We won't spend too long, and do not stress if this doesn't work for you. But on this page here, you can see the Geek Culture Primer. There's a video link. If you could try clicking on that, and maybe if it's working for you or not working for you, if someone can maybe type into the chat box, and we can see if that's happening, if you're getting sound with that. If not, no stress. We will definitely move forward, and we can check back in with that. Oh, I see some working. Great. If you want to watch this awesomely perky British woman talk about geek culture until about minute 2 and 22 seconds. All right. It sounds like the video was working for some people, may not have worked as well for others. So I apologize for that. Again, we are definitely going to send out these links. We're just kind of trying some new things to make sure that sound works for you as much as possible. So basically, that is something you can go back to too, especially if you are interested in some of the fashion pieces as well. Yes, we have some comments about loving that. Yeah, noticing that trend when people are really kind of incorporating some of that love of nerd culture into what they're wearing as well on that celebrity side. A great point is brought up too of in a lot of high schools now, yes, it is getting kind of more acceptable to be a little bit quirkier, to be a little bit more outsidery cool than sometimes it has been in the past. That is certainly dependent, high school by high school. So I don't want to make it seem like it's now an easy road for people who have been a little bit more on the social outside of different cliques before. But in many schools, it is actually getting easier school climate wise for those kiddos. So we are actually going to transition now to a poll question, because we are going to talk about music in just a moment. Music is certainly a very personal topic for all of us. It's very personal and often a sense of a sort of pride and identification for teenagers as well as adults. We are going to go over to this poll question, so this should have come up on your screen now. If you can, in this one box, it basically gives you one line to respond in, enter 2 or 3 of your favorite bands or musicians from when you were in high school. So if that was, 5 years ago, if that was 55 years ago, we would love to hear about it. Awesome. Answers are starting. So the first one, clearly a former Alterna kid after my own heart. Awesome. Some 80s hair bands. Bon Jovi, Motley Crue. Yep. Yeah. So we've got some responses like Fiona Apple, Pink Floyd, Queen, Dave Matthews Band, Zeppelin. Who doesn't remember their favorite middle school dance ending with all 45 minutes of Stairway to Heaven? Awesome. Great. So looking at the responses that we're getting here on our day when we're doing it live, not a lot of overlap, right? So a little bit, we've got some Bon Jovi's pretty well represented, Dave Matthews Band pretty well represented, but even that, we're definitely looking at a variety of interests. One of the interesting things that I found out as I was looking into, why do we sort of feel this very personal connection with the music that we listen to in high school, and why do high school students, really start to differentiate around that age and what they're interested in. Neuroscientist Daniel Levitin, if any of you have read his book, This Is Your Brain on Music, it's a very cool, very accessible neuroscience-based book. But one of the things that he discusses in that book is the way that neurologically, lifelong taste in music really, for most people, develops between ages 10 and 14, and really especially develops between 12 and 14. So if you think of freshman year of high school, it's interesting to kind of go back and see, how much of the stuff that you listen to today either maybe are those bands, but also are really kind of those genres of music that you liked. So when you're thinking of your teenagers that you're working with, this is the time that they're really cementing those kinds of interests, and not just, again, from just like I like this sort of band, but there's actually like neurological connections being made that are going to kind of keep those musical interests kind of close to their heart for the rest of their lives. So let's look at. Oh, thank you. We have in the chat box, we have another good recommendation for a book, How to Talk So Teens Will Listen, and How to Listen So Teens Will Talk. So I think I'm not familiar with that. It's maybe a book or an article. But yes, there's a lot of great neuroscience research out there to help us work with teens more effectively, so that it's effective for us and effective for them. So looking at music, going back to that Teen Institute survey and kind of focus group that we looked at, what was interesting is, we talked about TV. Those TV interests really were pretty mainstream. They pretty much aligned with a lot of what adults are watching, a lot of what's really popular kind of just nationally. What was really interesting is that those musical interests really diverged so much more from mainstream trends than the TV interests. We again kind of asked about those top 3 favorites. So not just, what are you listening to sometimes, but if you really had to narrow it down to your favorite 3, just like we asked you guys, who would those be? One of the things that was really interesting was that those acts really spanned decades. So we had folks talk about Pink Floyd, we had folks talk about Demi Lovato, so moving from, really moving over, kind of a 40, 50-year period. One of the things that was kind of interesting, again, it's not statistically significant, so certainly someone is listening to Billboard's top 10 artists, but one thing that was interesting is that none of the responses we got this fall matched up with the Billboard top 10 for October 2014. So those are just kind of an example of some of those artists, and we were not really seeing those. So definitely a lot of variety, definitely some variety in taste in terms of who's buying music and sort of what teens are necessarily listening to. And I wanted to kind of do just a little case study with a boy band that is popular today. So, so some of you may have heard of 5 Seconds of Summer. And I think they kind of represent some interesting trends in music that are very specific to 2014 and also show really some commonalities with generations before them as well. So one of the things that 5 Seconds of Summer has going for them is a rise to popularity that couldn't have happened many years before now. Much like a number of recent pop acts, they started out as YouTube stars. So they didn't start out with a record label. They really started out doing covers of songs they liked. 2011, 2012, just kind of, putting art that they like to create on YouTube and putting it out there for people to see, and then they developed a following. Their big break was in 2013. They opened for One Direction, and as if you haven't heard of 5 Seconds of Summer, you've probably definitely heard of One Direction, who are a huge pop act on the international scene. I wanted to share with you a video of of one of their songs, and watching it, kind of keeping in mind, especially if it's been a while since you've watched a video, since you've watched a music video, kind of think of not only, all right, what are these guys doing, but depending on the generation that you're coming from, maybe think of, how does this compare to a Monkees TV episode? How does this compare to like a Jackson 5 TV special? How does this compare to New Kids on the Block? So kind of thinking of watching it both in your frame and then also, what kids are experiencing today. There is one brief moment of a slightly off-color gesture. Again, if you're working with teens, you can probably handle it. I think it's still an important video, but just wanted to warn you that is there. So it seems like for most people, you're able to watch the video from here. I'm also going to copy the link to the video into the chat box. So whatever you had better luck with, and that chat box will be up there in just one sec. So we'll get the link for you in the chat box. If you did have luck watching the last video from the All right, it seems like people have been able to generally access the link either one of those two ways and are starting to wrap up watching. We have a comment, teens are some of the most creative people on earth. I love it. Yes, absolutely. We also comment, you know, like these well-crafted boy bands making us wish that we were just a little bit younger. So I wanted to make sure, even if you didn't get to really watch like the full video, again, if you're kind of thinking of that in terms of not just, all right, I'm watching, you know, these young kids in 2014, but also, you know, these are things this easily could have been taken out of, you know, again, kind of going back to like a Monkeys TV episode, you know, in the 60s, that sort of, you know, we're just a little bit fighting against the man, you know, this kind of jubilant rebellion that's cute and fun and doesn't take it quite too far. But I think there's definitely some commonalities to see. I think sometimes, especially because as adults, we have these musical tastes that are locked in, and we're not always in a place where either time or attention or interest we're exploring a lot of new music. Sometimes, you know, new bands or new musicians can kind of blend together in our minds, or it's not something that we're really looking at, and it's really fun to kind of see some of the ways that everything changes, but also things kind of stay the same, and there are commonalities that are really going to appeal to teens no matter when they are growing up. So anyway, hopefully that was just a fun little piece of music and a little bit of fun teen angst and joy to share for a few minutes. So let's talk about books for a sec. So as you may know, young adult books are a huge hit these days. It's carried over into movies. You know, we have things like The Hunger Games, Divergent. Obviously, a few years ago, we had things like Harry Potter. You know, that again also overlays a little bit into geek culture and geek chic. But you know, there's certainly a lot of reading going on, and whether they're again platform neutral, they may be reading on e-readers, they may be reading on their phones, they may be reading in, you know, traditional books. But reading is definitely very popular. So in our little focus group this fall, we looked at, again, kind of looking at top 3 books. They didn't have to be new, they didn't have to be assigned for school or not assigned for school. If you are an English teacher or know some, take heart. We definitely got a lot of responses. People really liked the classics along with a lot of the newer things. We definitely heard about Great Gatsby, To Kill a Mockingbird, some of those great things that are often assigned, but then people really come to enjoy them even though they were for work. I just want to look at, kind of take us through some of those top rated books that are newer in case you come across them. These might be ones if you're like, you know, I don't have time to, you know, read a lot of young adult books in my free time. Maybe one of these 5 that we're going to look at will appeal to you, and you can kind of get a little sample of what kids are reading based on some of these really popular ones. This is from a list from the Young Adults Library Services Association. They work with for this survey, 16 high school book focus groups across the country. None of those focus groups were specifically in New Hampshire, but we did have kids represented there from Massachusetts and Vermont, so probably a little bit related. Their top ones that these kids picked: Eleanor and Park. Rainbow Rowell is a really popular author these days with both kids and adults. So she's one of these adults that writes very fluidly back and forth between young adult geared novels and adult fiction as well. So you might have read Landline is a popular book of Rainbow Rowell's that is geared more towards adults. Eleanor and Park is a popular young adult novel of hers. So definitely fantasy, supernatural novels are very popular right now. Splintered was on that list. And again, you'll have the PowerPoint, so if there's something about the descriptions you want to read more of, because I definitely recommend finding one and checking it out. The Arithmetist is more in the sci-fi dystopia kind of future set books that are popular. The Fifth Wave, this is going to be a movie coming up, I think, in the next year or two. Again, future dystopian, very, very popular with what we're reading these days. And this book, Monument 14, Sky and Fire, is actually the second in the series. So if this one really appeals to you, you might want to find the first in the book, which is, the first in the series that is just called Monument 14. We have a question, are teens downloading books or buying hard/soft covered books? That is a great question that I don't have statistics about in front of me, but I will try and follow up with that and have that available in the files that you have available to you later on. Because that is a great question. I'm not sure about that, those kind of sales figures. So in the time we have remaining, let's talk a little bit about social networking websites and apps. I want to move, before we come back to the screen, I actually want to move forward just a little bit to the next poll question, because I'd love to hear, particularly from the folks who are experiencing this live, what some of your familiarity is, because we can then kind of tailor the last bit of time we're sharing together today with what you would like to know a little bit more of. So what you should see now, good, people are already starting. We have a list. If for some reason you can't see all of the choices, there are actually 9 possible boxes to check off. If you can't see them all, just kind of extend your window down. You can drag that bottom corner. And any that you're familiar with, that you use frequently, or feel comfortable navigating, kind of seeing where your current interests and knowledge are. Yes, Facebook certainly is showing up. I was not too worried that we'd have to do a half-hour walkthrough of Facebook. That is certainly something that has permeated U.S. and a lot of world culture at really all ages. So we got some other responses. Yeah, you know, so Google Plus seems to be another popular one that some of you folks know about. Definitely a little bit of familiarity with Instagram and Snapchat, and I can read over. Oh, with Vine, yep. Okay, so I think people have pretty much had time to fill in what they were going to say. So these choices that came from this list came from a 2013 national survey that was done that we have a link to in the references, and we also then just kind of use those with our group of teenagers this fall, and ask them, you know, what are their top 10 that they're spending time with. So we gave people unlimited choices, kind of in that same way that poll was, and hands down, just like you guys, Facebook was still #1. I think there's definitely been that sort of, you know, oh, our teens leaving Facebook, is everyone fleeing it because, you know, now my grandmother can see what I'm posting about this party or something like that. But Facebook has become so prevalent that even if teenagers aren't spending as much time on it, and there's definitely some national data to say that they are not spending as much time as they used to, they're not necessarily fleeing completely. So it's definitely still a way to get in touch with people. Definitely it sort of feels like a normal, well, yes, I still have my Facebook page, even if they're engaging with a lot of these other sites. Also, a lot of these other social networking apps are integrated with Facebook, so they can sort of use them from there as well. Instagram, that is for those of you that aren't familiar, that is a photo sharing app that you can use, and also that's very well integrated with Facebook because Facebook bought Instagram a couple years ago. So that's a lot of photo sharing. People can comment on photos, you can caption photos, you can add different filters. We will probably talk a little bit more about that in just a sec. Snapchat is an instant messaging app that you can send a message and choose how many seconds the viewer can see it for. So it could be a picture, it can be text, it can be a picture with text drawn over it. Obviously, something that you're sending that disappears in a few seconds has some risks for people sending stuff that might be a little less appropriate at times. And there has also been some controversy because it is fairly easy to screenshot to kind of capture that message and have it last for longer than the sender intended. So that is definitely something that people watch out for. Sounded like we had some familiarity with Google Plus. It's in some ways kind of Google's answer to Facebook. It has sort of different ways of sharing and some different chat options. Tumblr, didn't sound like we had a ton of familiarity with Tumblr. That's a microblogging site that's been around for about 7 years. It started in 2007. And that allows for, instead of, if you kind of think of a traditional blog, obviously if it's calling something a traditional blog dates us all, but we're looking at often long form written posts, maybe some pictures. Tumblr is really geared towards shorter posts, quick little paragraphs, pictures, videos. It's set up so you can really easily reblog something from someone else's Tumblr page. So there's a lot of connectivity between different Tumblr fans and different bloggers who use Tumblr. So that's kind of its fun little twist, and we'll look at some Tumblr pages in just a minute. Twitter is very, very microblogging. So that is, as you may know, limited to 140 characters. That's very internationally popular, and has been a way for people to communicate and get news in some areas. But again, it's your limited posts. Vine is an app that allows you to create video that's up to 6 seconds long. So you can take that, either a streaming video for those 6 seconds, or you can take a series of pictures and it'll combine them into a video that's 6 seconds long. I think depending, this is something that generationally, I think for a lot of us, we're like 6 seconds of a video. Is this just indicative that no one has an attention span anymore? But it is actually something that you can find some very cool projects with. Obviously, you have to, there's some best of vines that kind of separate the wheat from the chaff and all, because 6 seconds, not everyone's going to use it artistically, but it's kind of a cool way to communicate for a lot of people. And then we kind of got into some of these less market saturated apps. Kik Messenger is an instant messaging app. It allows users to share multimedia messages. It's modeled on BlackBerry Messenger, and it is so closely modeled on BlackBerry Messenger that BlackBerry Messenger sued Kik in 2010, actually, to settle a copyright infringement lawsuit. So if you are not familiar with Kik, but you are familiar with BlackBerry from maybe your workplace or from the past, that is very similar to that. Omegle and Ask.fm were not very popular in our focus group. They also, of the things on this list, I think have a reputation for kind of the most controversy. They are both ways that people can really interact with strangers a lot. So from both a teen perspective and really for any of us, no matter what, I think they are not, they are apps and websites where you don't have to engage with even a username in some cases. Really, people can engage just anonymously as strangers, and that obviously can cause some risks for adult sexual content, issues with cyberbullying. Ask.fm is a site where you can ask users questions. They can answer anonymously, and actually there have been a number of cyberbullying cases, especially in the UK, that Ask.fm has kind of been brought into that, because there's a lot of opportunity for anonymous verbal and kind of emotional abuse that can come through that. Which doesn't mean, of course, with any of these that everyone's using them for that purposes. I would just say that Omegle and Ask.fm have more of a potential for abuse, and I think if you kind of look at teen reviews online, there's definitely a lot of teenagers are saying, you know what, I wouldn't use that anonymously. Like, I definitely have friends that have had some issues with it. So it's definitely something where it's good to have a little bit of healthy suspicion and wanting to make sure that kids are safe using those last two. So again, just looking at those national numbers, we did look at an April 2014 study from Piper Jaffray, and it was looking again for more in a marketing perspective, how do we sell to teens? But they definitely, that top 5 list that we had found, they really, kind of had that as well. Yeah, we have some comments. Kids are definitely using Ask. Yep, it is. Because, when you're thinking about like developing your identity, I mean, it's a place where you can ask questions of other people. They can also be about yourself. And so that can be very cool, and a lot of people have had positive experiences. You can definitely get positive feedback, and it can be a cool way to interact with both people you know and don't know about kind of different, weightier topics, maybe some more serious topics than you would get to talk about, just in school, passing between halls, or, just kind of in a mundane day-to-day way. So people are definitely using this. It's definitely something to know about and explore a little bit. Sorry, and the difference between Omegle and Ask. Omegle is more like chat roulette, if you're familiar with chat roulette. And you get paired with a stranger, whereas ask is something where you can set up questions and then other people can then respond to them. So Omegle is more real time, and ask is more people interacting with a page that you've set up. There's also some questions about, some schools are different about whether kids can use their phones in school or not. So that's something that's a little bit different everywhere, but changes the school climate just a little bit. So I just want to tell you and tell you about these next two videos. We're not going to watch them kind of in the interest of time. But if you are, I know we didn't have a lot of familiarity in the live group, but Instagram, there's a really cool, just like 4-minute guide to how to use Instagram, how to, add filters, why you might want to use Instagram, what you can do with that, how you can kind of upload and curate your photos into kind of a story about your life. So it's a fun app to explore more of. And Snapchat is also here in terms of, if you are not super familiar with what Snapchat is and both some of the pros and cons of Snapchat, this is a great video to check that out as well. And let's see, there was one question about, do you know about an app where you can video chat with random people? I know you can use Omegle, the mobile version of that for that. Chat roulette isn't as popular quite anymore, but it's definitely still something that people use, and there are probably a number of others that you guys know about too. So looking at Tumblr, one thing I wanted to kind of just share a couple pages in Tumblr, because this is something that age-wise, Tumblr can really appeal to folks of all ages. So I would definitely recommend clicking on these links in a little bit, because they have some very, very fun things. If you like a topic, you can find a Tumblr blog that will share some things that you didn't know about that topic. It is so broad. There's so many cool things to explore. Of course, are there things that might have some questionable content? There might be. There certainly is, but it's definitely something that is a fun way to explore the internet and kind of explore different pop culture things. Of the links that I had here, these were the top 3 when we looked at 2013 web traffic. Movie quotes and inside jokes, pretty broad, definitely something that's fun to look at, is geared definitely towards teens and young adults. How do I put this gently is kind of geared towards college students, the very fun reaction-based blog. So, taking popular culture like movie stills, taking different photos, different like short video clips, and really showing some kind of reactions to regular life. One that is definitely not geared towards teens, but is one of the most popular Tumblrs, is Reasons My Son is Crying. If you haven't checked this out, if you have a toddler or have ever had a toddler in your life, Reasons My Son is Crying is pretty amazing. And then I had to, of course, throw in my personal favorite, which is Terrible Real Estate Agent Photographs. If you've ever gone through searching for a house, please check this out and you will just laugh out loud. Yes, there's a comment. Yeah, absolutely. One of the great things to remember is the internet is just something that's kind of capturing and documenting sexual content that already exists. It doesn't necessarily mean that the format we're seeing it on is negative, or that the format like kids are experiencing this on. This is something that is kind of out there, and for us as folks who work with teens, to be able to know what these formats are and explore them, and also know that the ways that they're used positively and as part of positive culture and pop culture and teenage development is very, very important as well. So with that, this is obviously just a quick overview. Hopefully you've been able to maybe see a few things that you hadn't seen before. I definitely invite you to explore some of those links afterwards. They're definitely a fun way to learn a little bit more in a very quick way about the different things that we talked about today. If you have any questions, again, please look at that contact info. We will upload. Oh, I will upload. I'm gonna Oh, it's uploaded. The PowerPoint is already there. The PowerPoint, again, if you look at that files pod that is to the right of the main PowerPoint there, that is uploaded. You can download the PowerPoint Teen plus Culture plus Webinar 143043, and that will allow you to explore all of these links. And so with that, yeah, thank you so much again. Thank you so much for everyone who participated in this live. It was so great to see your comments and hear what's going on. And we want to keep being a champion for teens. I'm so excited that there are so many awesome people in New Hampshire who are champions for teens out there in the schools and in the community as well. If you have friends that you think might want to see this, this webinar will be available in about 2 weeks on the NHADACA website. Again, nhadaca.org. You can find that. So thank you guys so much. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day whenever